Lee Zlotoff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martin. Good to be here.
So why don't you tell our audience who you are and what your background is?
I'm a professional storyteller, is really what I am. Now, in technical terms, I've been a writer, producer, director in the entertainment industry for probably longer than it's politic to announce. But luckily, I've thrived in that particular business, and I still enjoy it because I never let it burn me out, which is not uncommon when you've been in the entertainment business for a long time. And so I write, produce, direct film and television primarily. I do other things too, but that's kind of what I've been doing for my professional career. And I am known for a number of creations, but probably the thing I'm best known for is having created the original MacGyver TV series, which you may or may not know, ran for 7 seasons initially and then was sold to pretty much 75 foreign countries around the world and has more or less run nonstop for the last 34 plus years. And so has kind of become this sort of global meme or meme, depending on how you want to pronounce that word.
I have one friend who pronounces it meme.
Meme.
I'm a meme person, but when I heard meme, I was like, what?
Yeah. And so when you think about that, for how long it's been out there and how long it's been running, we're sort of talking about billions of people having seen this and apparently been moved and touched by it to the point where, you know, MacGyver is now a verb in pretty much every dictionary to MacGyver or something.
I use it. I just MacGyvered, MacGyvered my computer setup. Totally.
There you go. So that's what I'm best known for. I've done other things, obviously lots of other things.
Well, I definitely want to talk about that, but I love my brother very much, and it'd be remiss if I didn't start asking you about the episodes you wrote for Remington Steele. That was his favorite show, and long before he became James Bond, this Remington Steele, my brother just loved that show. So how did you wind up? I think that was one of your earlier credits, right?
That was, I think, the second show I wrote for. Yeah. And it, for those who don't remember, it starred Stephanie Zimbalist and Pierce Brosnan. And sort of the original premise was that she was the brains, and this kind of, I guess he was sort of international criminal, stumbled into her life and began pretending he was Remington Steele, and she was caught because she was a woman who wanted to have a detective agency and realized nobody would take her seriously because they always wanted a man, and so she created this fictional character called Remington Steele. And this guy kind of slams in and pretends he's Remington Steele, and she can't say you're a fraud because there is no Remington Steele. And so she ended up kind of being stuck with him. And that was sort of the setup for the show. And needless to say, it ran for quite some time. I was only with it for a couple of seasons, but it was a lot of fun, and they were both great to work with. And it was kind of the forerunner of Moonlighting and a lot of those other, I guess it kind of borrowed from what was that show, Nick and Nora Charles, the
Thin Man series.
Yes, the Thin Man series. So it was kind of man and woman detectives, crime solving together, lots of sexual tension, rarely fulfilled, and that was television back in the 80s. So.
Totally. What I loved about the show was really the crime fighting was completely a side point. It was just the smoldering between them, and the way that it's just the cat and mouse game, and you can't tell who the cat and who the mouse was, and that was what was so fun about it. So yeah, that literally was my brother's favorite show. And you never know the stuff that you touch and the difference that you make, but definitely that was an important show to me anyway. How did you get into the writing game?
Well, let's see, I had done a bunch of theater as a kid. And then when I got into college, I started to do photography. And a friend of my parents came to me when I was in college and said, "So what do you think you're going to do?" And I said, "I have no clue what I'm going to do." And he said, "Well, you might with the theater stuff as a kid, and now you're doing photography, you might be interested in going into the entertainment business." I thought, huh? And he goes, "And, if you can write, that's a really good way into the business because, if you're an actor, you have to act in something. If you're a director, you have to direct something. If you're a producer, you have to produce something. If you're a writer, you can just write whatever you want and send it to somebody, and you don't have to be there when they look at it." So I tried. I was a contractor. That's how I supported my wife at the time and myself through college. And so I was successful enough after I graduated, because my wife was a year behind me, that I worked as a contractor for 6 months. And then I took the next 6 months off and I tried writing a script. And my friend showed it around to some agents and other people. And they said, "Look, he's young and he's raw, but he can write." So my friend said, "Keep writing. This is encouraging news." Eventually, when I was finished with college, we relocated to New York City. And I managed to get myself a job as a secretary on a soap opera. And at some point, I went to the producer of the soap opera and I said, "I think I can write the show better than it's being written." I figured one of two things was going to happen. He was either going to entertain this possibility, he was going to fire me. And I didn't go to the soap opera to be a secretary. So he said, "Really, that's a pretty cocky thing for a secretary to say. You got anything to back it up?" I said, "Well, I got this script I wrote." So I gave him the script, figured, like I say, worst case scenario, I'm going to get fired. Next day he comes in, he walks past my desk, he goes, "You, in my office, now." I went, "Oh, here it comes." I walk in the office, he says, "Close the door." Oh, I close the door. He goes, "Sit down." I sit down. And I'm thinking, you could just fire me out at my desk, we don't have to go through all this. And he looks at me and he says, "So I read your script last night, and you're right. So you got a job as a writer now. You're no longer a secretary." That's how I got my first writing job.
Wow.
And the rest, as they say, is, thousands and thousands of episodes and scripts later, here I am. So.
How long did you do the soap opera for?
I did it for about a year. And this is back in, God, had to be back in like 78 or something like that, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And I did it for a year, but I was like 22 years old, and full of piss and vinegar. And my job, the way soap operas is written, is you have head writers who write the outlines. And then you have a bunch of what they call sub-writers or dialogue writers. So I was sent 2 or 3 scripts. These were half-hour soap operas at that point. The show was called The Doctors. It was a Colgate-Palmolive show.
Oh, I remember it.
Right. And my job was to just take their outlines and just crank out tons and tons of dialogue, turn them into dialogue. But being young, and soap operas are basically like sex without orgasm. How do we just keep this thing going and going and going and going? And I'm 22, and man, I want to make stuff happen. So I'd get these calls from the head writer, and they go, "Lee, yeah, what is this on page 22?" I go, "What do you mean?" "Will you have Jessica slap Bill?" And I go, "Bill really needed a slap, don't you think?" And they went, "Look, sweetheart, we love you, but that's not your job. You're just supposed to write the dialogue. You're not supposed to do anything else." And I went, "Okay, yeah, I hear you." Well, after about the 3rd or 4th time that I got that call, they said, "Lee, maybe soap writing isn't for you."
No.
And I went, something, maybe you're right. I mean, I was making at the time easily $3,000 a week, which back in look, it's still a lot of money, but back then it was an enormous amount of money. But in my heart, I would say, this isn't what I want to be doing. So needless to say, after having done it for a year, I put a lot of money aside And I said, okay, I'm just not going to write soap operas anymore. And I moved on, you know?
It's funny because I watched the very first episode of MacGyver because Richard Dean Anderson was on the soap opera. It was on General Hospital.
Yep.
There was this weird time in the culture. It was when I was in college. You know, just everyone watched soap operas and everyone watched General Hospital. And so I heard that he was on this thing. So I checked it out in the first episode. So that's funny. Is there any, were you still connected to the soap opera people, or it's just a coincidence that he was?
Oh no, I had nothing to do with casting Richard Dean Anderson. You know, by then I was in Los Angeles, and you know, and MacGyver was the first pilot I ever wrote. So, but I was not actively involved in putting the show together. My job was just to, you know, write the pilot for ideally something that would last at least 5 years, which, knock on wood, it did. So
yeah, well, it really is amazing. So let's talk about MacGyver.
Sure.
When I've had other guests on here, one of my good friends, Kevin Bass, he used to build robots for NASA, and he builds robots for Disney to do all sorts of stuff. It was funny when he worked in NASA, he could tell me all about what he was doing, but when he worked at Disney, now it's all
it's all secret.
He works for the CIA. But anyway, so we were talking. I'm like, oh, you know, I'm researching. You know, I'm going to talk to Lee, the person that wrote MacGyver, and he's like, oh my God, that was my hero. That was like, he started tinkering with things off of MacGyver, and it was like so many, you know, I'm sure girls as well, but boys, you know, that work with their hands. It's like to have a role model that can figure out how to do things. It was just so brilliant and made such a difference for so many people. So when you were writing the pilot, what was in your mind when you were thinking this?
Well, so the way MacGyver came about was kind of unusual, because it wasn't as if I had an idea and I went and pitched it and they bought it and I wrote it. I was actually hired to write a pilot that had already been sold by Henry Winkler's company and Paramount. And I was told, oh, they have this concept that's never been done before. I went, cool, you know, of course they didn't want to tell me what it was until I took the job. So I get the job. Okay, and I go in and I go, all right, tell me what this cool concept is. And you know, it was a single lead action adventure hero. Okay, great. And then they told me this concept, and I asked them a couple of questions. And then I was in the very uncomfortable position of saying to them, you know, guys, there's a reason this has never been done before. They said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I don't think it's going to work. And they went, what? Now, look, nobody likes to be told their baby's ugly. You know, it's like, but we sold this to the network. I said, I understand. I could write that as a pilot. But as a series, I think it's not going to work. You're going to choke to death on this idea. And so there was the kind of long, awkward pause. And then I ended up having a meeting with Henry Winkler. And halfway through the meeting, I realized I wasn't meeting with Henry Winkler. I was meeting with the Fonz, because he was walking around like slapping a baseball bat against his hand. You know, he wasn't happy. And I'm thinking,
was he wearing the leather jacket?
No, he wasn't wearing a leather jacket. And by the way, Henry is one of the nicest guys in the world. I mean, truly. But, you know, he knew half hours, he knew sitcoms, but the drama world was new to him. And I said, look, I'm sorry if you're upset with me, Henry. I'm really just trying to do my job, which is to give you a show that will ideally last 5 seasons. And if you don't want me to write it, you want to go hire somebody else, I'm fine with that. He said, no. We're not going to unsell this thing. You know, you got to fix it. I went, okay. So first I came up with one idea, and the network didn't like it. I came up with another idea, and the network didn't like that. I came up with another idea, and the network didn't like that. And I thought, oh my God, I could be pitching this thing for the rest of my life. So I got all my writer friends, and I called them into my office, and I locked the door. And let's just say there were numerous inebriants available to whoever wanted to partake. And I said, we're not leaving this room until I have a kick-ass idea to get me through this pilot and out of this deal. And so they said, well, what do you have? So I told them everything I had. And I said, but the network hates it all. So I got nothing. That's why you're here. I don't know where to go with this anymore. I have absolutely nothing. And there was this long pause. And then one of my friends said, okay, let's go with that. I said, let's go with what? They said, let's go with nothing. I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, you know, James Bond, he gets all those toys from Q at the beginning, right? I go, yeah. And Indiana Jones, he's got the gun and the hat and the whip. What if our guy has nothing? And I went, oh my God, that's it. We send this guy into a situation. He's got nothing. He's got to figure it out on the fly. And then I thought, if we take the gun away from him, he can't even shoot back. Okay, now, whatever you feel about guns, this had nothing to do with a moral choice on my part. Remember, I'm just trying to write my way out of this deal. Right. But I thought if he doesn't have a gun, then every week he's going to have to come up with something to get him out of a jam or beat the bad guys or, you know, whatever it is. And I thought, there's the hook for the show, right? Because he goes in and he's got nothing now. You know, when I was growing up, my dad, who was really in some ways the model for MacGyver, because my dad was one of those guys who could do carpentry, masonry, electrical, plumbing, woodwork, you named it. He could do it all. Okay. And when I was like 10, he gave me a Swiss Army knife. And he said, you hang on to this in your pocket all the time. It's one of the best tools you'll ever have. Okay. I said, okay, Dad. Still have that Swiss Army knife. All right. Wow. I have many other Swiss Army knives now, and so that's how MacGyver got a Swiss Army knife in his pocket. And it was like, okay, do
you still carry the pocket knife with you?
Always, except when I fly, because then they take it away. So, I don't take it with me when I fly.
Can we see it?
Can we see it? Oh, sure. I don't remember. I think the original one is in a safe somewhere, but I always carry a Swiss Army knife with me.
That's beautiful.
And so that's how MacGyver was born. You know, it was like, because I realized we had just done exactly what the character was about. We took nothing and we turned it into something.
That's beautiful. And in a way, and you were writing about your dad in some ways, right?
In a way, I really was. Honestly, at the time, I don't even think I was aware of that. But, you know, and then, of course, they cast Richard Dean Anderson, who was originally Canadian. And so he had that kind of humility, as opposed to, you know, Rambo's got nothing but, you know, balls and bravado, and James Bond, who's, so cool, shaken, not stirred. It's like, come on, guys, you haven't had an empire in how long, you know? And you know, Indiana Jones, who is daring, and MacGyver was just like, he was like the smartest guy in the room, but he never acted like the smartest guy in the room, you know? And so that, for whatever reason, P.S., they read the pilot, they go, we love this, we're making this. Next thing I know, they shot the pilot, and it's like, it's going to series. And I went, what? You know, and the rest, it just took off. But I didn't, just to be clear with anybody who's paying attention to this, I only wrote the pilot. I did not stay with the series. So really, the truth is, the success of this series really belongs to Richard Dean Anderson, all the writers, all the producers, all the directors, and all the actors who made those shows. I think of it as, you know, look, if you have a kid and the kid grows up and does something amazing, you're proud of the kid, right? But you can't sit there and say, I did it, because I didn't do it. You know, MacGyver went out and did it. Now, was that blueprint or was that concept, I guess, right for the time? I guess the answer was yes, because it's still here.
Well, I think it's particularly apropos right now, because we're kind of having to MacGyver our way through this Corona situation, right? So,
absolutely. And not a day goes by now that I don't get emails or you know, or alerts from somebody where, oh, there's an article and they say this guy was MacGyver, or they MacGyvered this, or they did that. Because Look, one of the great things about MacGyver was the notion that you had more resources inside of you than you might be aware of. And if you just took the time to, number one, not panic, okay, number two, look around at what was available to you, and then number three, say, how do I turn what I have into what I need? Okay, and you're absolutely right. Right now, that's something all of us have to find a way to do. You know, thank God the food systems for the most part are still working, you know, so we're not out there, you know, trying to kill rabbits and eat rats, you know, but in this completely unexpected situation, you stop and you go, okay, I'm kind of scared. Well, it's all right to be scared. There's scary stuff going on, but you can't succumb to your fear. I mean, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is being afraid and doing what you need to do anyway. Okay. And so it's like, okay, what do you need to get through this situation for your family, for your friends, for your community? And right now, I have a very simple kind of, you know, working system, which is if you need help, ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because at some point in our lives, we all need help. And if you don't need help, then find a way to help somebody else, okay? Whether that's food or going to the market for them or picking up the phone and just talking to them because they're lonely, doesn't matter. But if you don't need help, find a way to help somebody else. And if you need help, ask for it.
So what's it like in Santa Fe? You live in Santa Fe now, and you're talking to us from Santa Fe. How are people helping each other where you are?
Oh, well, there are no shortage of movements here to help feed people who need being fed. We have there's an organization here called Kitchen Angels, which has been going on for years, which feeds people who otherwise can't get out and feed themselves. So that's probably been redoubled at this point. I have friends who are putting together sort of like a telethon, you know, to raise funds for artists and other people. One of the interesting things about, you know, this area of the country is this area has been the most inhabited piece of the United States longer than any place else. Really? The Native Americans have been here for millennia. The Spanish came, they've been here for give or take 500 years. The Anglos came and they've been here for about 100 years, give or take, okay? So people have learned to survive here for a long time. And one of the ways you survive in a beautiful but relatively harsh place is you cooperate. You work together. And there's a lot of that going on here. And, you know, our governor basically shut things down very quickly. So I think as of the other day, I think I read there were about 1,300 known cases. About 31 people have died, mostly people who were older or who had compromised systems. And they've tested probably somewhere between 10 and 15,000 people. So also keep in mind, in a place like in Santa Fe, we're a lot more spread out. You know, I don't live in town. I live outside of town, and much of Santa Fe lives around and outside of Santa Fe. And, you know, we're not cheek to jowl in terms of our buildings. So plus, you know, here the spring is coming, so you can just go outside and go for a drive or go for a walk or go for a hike. We're not trapped inside. We just have to limit our social contact, obviously. And so all but the essential services have pretty much been shut down. And, you know, hopefully within another few weeks or a month, we'll see the number of cases start dropping off. So all things considered, we're very fortunate out here. It is not by any means considered a hot spot, you know. So, but you have to, you know, when we go out now and go to the market, we wear masks, we wear gloves, and we just follow, some simple basic precautions. That's all.
So, are you finding yourself getting reconnected to friends further away?
Yes, yes, because my friends who are in San Francisco and New York and Los Angeles, I've been reaching out to them to just check in and say, how are you doing? Friends who are older, friends who have kids, whatever it is. So yes, it seems to me one of the golden opportunities in this is to say, get out of yourself and just reach out to people. Of course, you're going to talk to the people who you would generally talk to on a regular basis anyway, but you probably have a circle of people who you haven't talked to in a while. Use this opportunity to see how they're doing, and if they need anything. And like I say, if you don't need help, try and help somebody.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Montreal, left a long time ago. And this afternoon, I'm on a call with a couple of my friends from elementary school, two of my best friends, and a bunch of their friends, and just, oh, Canada, welcome, get a chance to talk to them. So I think a lot of people are doing that. But now I wonder, since you're a writer, if this was a pilot or if this was a movie, how would you write the ending of this? How would you write us out of this?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question, and I think the answer is, one of the things that this has made acutely obvious now is we are all connected. Okay, this notion of, well, our country is going to withdraw from the world, and it's like we've been a global economy for the better part of 75 years. We're clearly a global civilization. Okay, and this is happening in large part because we've been pushing on this planet pretty hard. You have 7.5 billion people, and they start taking more and more territory, and they take that territory from other animals and other species. This virus came from another species, okay? And that species was under threat or endangerment. And so this virus went, hey, this species that I'm living in is not doing so good. So I'm going to see if I can leap to another species, because the virus, like anything else, is looking to survive and thrive. And it jumped onto humans and went, this is awesome. There's lots of humans and they're everywhere. So watch this, guys. And, out it came running. Okay. So A, we're all connected. B, we're going to have to stop and think a little bit about the way we've been doing things in the world, because I think it's not unlikely that it's not going to be another 100 years till this happens again. Okay, this could happen again in 5 years or 10 years or less. Just like we pushed hard on this planet, and the climate is starting to push back, and it's like, oh, we've had 300-year storms in the past 5 years. Well, guess what? They're not 100-year storms anymore. So the way to write us out of this, I think, is we got to take a breath, which we're being forced to do. We got to think about the way we're doing things. And we have to revisit, is this the best way to be doing things? Are the choices we've been making, both as individuals, as communities, as countries, as a globe, are these the best choices to make now? And the answer may be, we may have to rethink some of this stuff. And we may have to revive how we do about it, how we go about it. So you can thrive, but it doesn't mean we have to have eternal growth, because nothing can grow eternally. At some point, it has to contract. And that's part of what I think we're seeing right now. This is a kind of contraction. Fortunately, as sad as it is that people are dying, and more people will die from this, it's a tiny, tiny percent of the population of the world. Bubonic plague wiped out virtually every other person in Europe. Okay, that was 50% or more of the population. All right, that's not this. Okay, when AIDS came along, anyone and everyone who got AIDS pretty much died from it. That's not this. as bad as it is, as pandemics go, the vast majority of us are going to survive this. So then we have the question of, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to go right back to what we used to be doing, or are we going to find some new ways to do things? And if I were writing this, I'd say it's time to stop with all the fear, stop with all the rhetoric, and say, how do we really do things now so that we can take care of this 7.5 billion people and make that sustainable as opposed to unsustainable?
Yeah. What I think is interesting, what you're pointing to, is that we're naturally going to change the way we're making decisions on an individual level, which will kind of ripple through at the larger level. I don't know what to say about that, but I think you'll write it more interesting than I'm saying it, for sure.
Look, the truth is we're all going to write the ending to this because, as I think you said, maybe even before we started recording, each of us is going to have to work our own way through this. And we're watching a lot of governments, you know, either be confused, be frightened, not know exactly how to respond properly. And at the end of the day, we're all just going to have to MacGyver our way through this. And it's going to come from individuals who stand up, step up, and go, this is what we're going to need to do now. And hopefully that will be reflected in a positive way in elections to come and policies that come out of countries. But we're going to need to stop competing against each other so much and look for ways to cooperate a lot more. I mean, certainly that's what all the governors in the United States are doing now. They go, hey, our peak is over. We're sending ventilators to you because your peak is coming up. Okay. And the whole plan now is we can't stop this thing. All we can do is try and prevent it from overwhelming our healthcare systems so that so many people aren't getting so sick at the same time that we literally can't care for them. Okay. And so that idea of cooperation, I think, is going to become a lot more crucial, whether it's in business, whether it's in politics, whether it's in medicine. You know, there are lots of opportunities here to go, maybe there's a better way to do this. So
are you able to take the time to write more?
Well, you know, honestly, other than all the social stuff that my wife and I would typically do here in Santa Fe, lunches and events in the evening and seeing friends, our lives aren't all that much different. She's a painter, so she's painting, you know, and I'm a writer and entrepreneur, so I'm writing and doing entrepreneurial stuff, but I'd be doing that anyway. So my day-to-day life is not fundamentally different, except for the fact that, you know, we're not going out that much, and, you know, we spend more time at home. But as writers, you tend to be alone anyway. So
can you tell us a little bit about what your entrepreneurial efforts have been around?
Sure. So I'm involved in a couple of things. One is, you know, there obviously up until the virus crisis hit, New Mexico is experiencing an enormous spurt of production, Hollywood production, film and television production here. It's kind of exploding. Netflix bought a studio here, Comcast bought a studio here. So, and part of what I'm involved in is trying to, you know, that hires a lot of crew people, but it doesn't hire a lot of writers, actors, directors, producers, people who are what we call above the line talent. And so I've been working to see if there's a way to take all this work that's coming in here and start using it to build the above the line community, the creative community, as opposed to just the crew community. So that's one thing I've been heavily involved in. And then, so the other part of the MacGyver story that I didn't mention was that after the series had run for 7 seasons, I, along with the studio, discovered that they had actually dropped the ball legally, and I ended up owning all the rights to MacGyver, which virtually never happens in Hollywood.
I'm sure you were crushed to find that out.
Yeah, I don't think crush was really I first was awe and astonishment. And then second was like, really? And so I have 4 grown children. I have 4 grandchildren. And so a while back, I thought, okay, I own these rights to MacGyver. Why did MacGyver become this global phenomenon? And I came away with 3 answers. One was, well, he didn't use a gun. Okay, he was unlike every other action adventure hero out there in that he didn't use a gun. And then obviously there was all that, creativity, resourcefulness, ingenuity. And no matter how life-threatening the situation was, he always maintained a sense of humor and humility, okay? And I realized in looking at this century, when you have grandchildren, you start seeing them with children, so forth down the road, and you go, this is an important century. We get this century right, this thing we called civilization has a future. We don't get this century right, I'm not sure that's necessarily true, as we are currently witnessing, okay? And I thought, okay, so the reason people love MacGyver are actually great management tools for this century. One, avoid conflict. Why? Because conflict usually just leads to more conflict. And in the words of Greta Thunberg, even if you win the conflict, the house is still on fire. Okay, so avoid conflict. 2, how do you turn what you have into what you need? Whether you're an individual, a community, a state, a country, a civilization. How do we turn what we have into what we need? And then the third thing was, the best way to do that is to maintain a sense of humor and humility, because a laughing and open mind is a lot more likely to come up with a good solution than a frightened, resentful, or angry mind. We can divide ourselves in half and everybody can hate their neighbor and, we can have civil war. That's not going to solve anything, okay? We're going to all have to find a way to work together just as we are now. The truth is, for all our political divisions in this country, we have a lot more in common than we have against each other. So why are we doing this? And I would say, well, we have enemies, foreign and domestic, for whom it serves them for us to stay divided against each other. And it's like, yeah, I don't see that serves us. I think that serves them, but I'm not sure it serves us. So I thought, okay, for the sake of my grandchildren and everybody else's at the same time, I'm going to bring MacGyver back in as many platforms as I can, mostly, obviously, in entertainment. So there's a new reboot MacGyver TV series that's on now. Been on CBS, going into its 4th season, I think. Working on a MacGyver feature film. Working on, we just debuted, right before this thing hit, we launched a MacGyver musical. Really? And believe it or not, in every performance of the musical, the role of MacGyver is cast out of the audience.
Wow.
So it's just like the show, the TV show, and that you really have no idea what's going to happen because we really have no idea what's going to happen.
That's brilliant.
And we did that. We did a workshop production in Telluride, Colorado. Some point this summer, hopefully, we'll be doing another production in Houston, Texas, and then we'll see where it goes from there. And then there's a MacGyver virtual reality escape room. They're working on MacGyver games. We're putting together a new MacGyver website, and I have a MacGyver Foundation that supports people and organizations with those 3 core values: avoid conflict, figure out how to turn what you have into what you need, and for God's sakes, try and maintain a sense of humor and humility. So I spend probably 50% of my time working on a variety of MacGyver projects. Less about making money. I've got nothing against making money, but I've made money. Money's a resource. Money's not an end in itself. Doesn't matter how much money you have when you die, you're still dead. As far as I know, nobody's figured out a way to take it with them. So it's less about money than, these are great management tools for the world that already loves this character. So all I have to do is bring him back and say, remember why you love this character? Well, you can use this stuff. You're going to need it.
You're literally trying to get people to MacGyver their way through life.
Yeah, in a sense, because I guess I'm a firm believer in that we have at our disposal, within us, vast resources that most of us are convinced early on that we shouldn't pay attention to or are not good, and we have to do everything the way somebody else tells us to do it. And I think that's not necessarily true. And I think if we tap into our own resources, we can do extraordinary things as individuals, as communities, as a globe. You know, we made this mess. We can fix this mess. I mean, it's not hard to imagine. Now, if we're too afraid and we're too angry, then yeah, we're going to make bad decisions, and we're going to blame other people and, you know, and look for conflict. That's not really going to get us anywhere. We're going to have to solve the problems of this planet together. And we have the capacity to do that, I believe. I saw some great quote, and then I'll let you ask a question or talk, but the quote was something like, if you don't think one person can change the world, just look at the first person who got coronavirus. Now, if one person can do this to the world in a negative way, who's to say one person couldn't start doing something to the world in a positive way? And if 1 million of us did that, or 1 billion of us did that, or 3 billion of us did that, might be a very different world. Anyway. So for my soapbox.
Well, I may say you're sounding very Canadian. So.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, but no, I think that's a good thing. Well, question for you then: do you like hockey? Do you know?
You know, my problem with hockey is I love watching those guys skate. I can never figure out where the puck is. You know, so unless you're sitting in the arena, the hockey rink, it's like. It all happens so fast. I mean, even in baseball, it's hard to see the ball, but, you know, and baseball, good or bad, takes its sweet time. Hockey's a little more, you know, active, passionate game. But it's like, I never know where the puck is until like somebody scores, you know? So.
Well, you know, my theory is that there's two types of people in the world: people that love hockey and people that don't love hockey yet. So.
Well, maybe there's hockey in my future, Martin. What can I say?
I think there's hope for you. And
okay.
You know, when hockey comes back, the next time you're in town, I'll have to take you to a hockey game and show you where the puck is and how to find it.
There you go.
But
I remember once Fox did something when they were broadcasting hockey. They put some chip inside it. And so when on the screen it had a little
glow puck, but
it had a glow puck, right? And then I don't know, they stopped. I guess diehard hockey fans thought that was somehow.
Well, just like MacGyver is coming back, so is the hockey puck with a chip in it.
There you go.
Coming back next year. Actually, they are doing that.
Really? Well, see.
Well, they've got one of the big problems the new fans talk about is that they don't know where the puck is. So they are going to have an option, you know, you don't necessarily want it all the time, but they're learning how to do it in a more subtle way. And so they're working on that. But, you know, one of the things I find so interesting when I talk to you is how, you know, you say one man made a difference. I just think about how the lessons that your father taught you, the lessons that you learned as a kid, you know, you as a writer, you don't think of TV writers or movie writers as being handy, but the fact that, you know, your dad taught you how to use the tools that so much so that you were a contractor when you started, and the fact that, you know, you still keep your your Swiss Army knife. So I was going to say, like, you know, this is not this exact pen, but my dad used to write with Parker pens, and so I keep a Parker pen just because it just reminds me of my dad. It reminds me where I've been. And it's funny, like, you just see you talk about how we're all connected. You know, you're very different than I am, but there are some things that you have that, like, you still have your dad around you, just like I've got my dad around me. And it's cool to see. It's cool to watch. I was wondering, Is there something you'd want to leave our audience with? Is there some particular message that you've got for them?
Yeah. I think I've said it, but it probably doesn't, it probably bears repeating, which is it's okay to be afraid, but don't let yourself become overtaken by that fear, because most of us have more resources at our disposal than we know if we just stop and think about it. And I don't mean just resources in our home or in our community. I mean resources within ourselves, okay? And if you look at those resources and think about what is it I need and what is it I have, 9 times out of 10, if not 99 out of 100 times, you'll be able to turn what you have into what you need. But it starts with believing that and not feeling like I'm at the mercy of everything around me. You're not at the mercy of everything around you. For the most part, you have a lot more agency than you're given credit for. You've just been told all your life that you need stuff that they sell on TV, or you need this or that, and without it, you're no good. And the truth is, you don't need most of that stuff, you know? You need a roof over your head, you need food to eat, you need water to drink. After that, it's pretty much all gravy, you know? So trust and believe that you have the resources you need to not only get through this, but to get through anything else in your life. But bad things are going to happen to everybody. Nobody sails through life and everything is perfect. What defines you is how you react to those bad things, okay? Do you succumb to them? Do you become bitter? Or do you find a way to rise above them and succeed in spite of them, okay? And right now, as a globe, we have an opportunity to succumb to fear and hatred and anger, or we can rise above those things and define ourselves as, no, humans can cooperate, humans can build things, humans can solve big problems. So if I've got one thing left to say to people is stop being afraid and start trusting in yourself, because chances are you can take care of whatever you need to take care of.
That's lovely. You're obviously a writer, very eloquent. So audience can watch MacGyver. They can stream it on CBS.
I believe it's on Friday nights, 8 o'clock, I think, Eastern and Pacific, and 7 o'clock Central. But these days, you can find everything everywhere. I think it's online, or it's on CBS All Access, or, I don't know.
I watch it on CBS All Access, but
there you go.
What's so funny is, like, I vaguely remember there used to be a time and a channel that you'd watch things, and now is not that way. So what about the rest of all the MacGyver game and all the various things? Is there I'm happy to link it in the show notes. Is there a kind of MacGyver Central where people?
We're actually sort of building that MacGyver Central now. So the answer is I don't have a link for you yet. Hopefully within the next few months, that link will be there. So
that's not a bug, that's a feature. When you build it, you can come back on and tell us about it.
You got it.
So that works very well. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Martin. Take care.